The custom Mustang gleamed under my garage lights like a promise kept. 3 months of evenings spent rebuilding her engine, and she finally purged like a contented cat. I wiped grease from my hands with an old rag, savoring the satisfaction that only comes from fixing something broken with your own 2 hands. My name's Jake Morrison, and I restore classic cars for people who have more money than mechanical sense. It's honest work in a dishonest world, and it pays the bills in this faded factory town where good jobs dried up faster than paint in August. The drive home took me through downtown Millbrook, past boarded storefronts and the old textile mill that's been empty since the 90s. Streetlights cast yellow pools on cracked pavement, and the whole place felt like a movie set for a story nobody wanted to tell. Our split-level house sat on Maple Street, looking respectable enough in the darkness. Laura always insisted we maintain appearances, even if the mortgage payments made my wallet cry. I pulled into the driveway, noting her BMW parked at an odd angle, like she'd been in a hurry. That should have been my first clue. I opened the front door and nearly tripped over a pair of expensive leather shoes. Size 11. Italian leather. Definitely not mine. My work boots were steel-toed and practical. These looked like they belonged to someone who'd never worked a day with his hands. "Honey, I'm home," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty hallway. No response. The house felt different somehow, charged with an energy that made my skin crawl. Upstairs, I heard Laura's laugh. Musical and light, the way she used to laugh with me before ambition became her religion and I became just another piece of furniture. But tonight, there was something else mixed in with her laughter. Another voice. Male. Familiar. I stood in my own hallway, holding my breath like a burglar in my own home, listening to my wife giggle with another man in our bedroom. The bedroom where we'd planned our future, where our kids had crawled into bed during thunderstorms, where I'd held her when her father passed away. The smart move would have been to storm upstairs, throw open the door, and confront them both. The dumb move would have been to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I've always prided myself on being neither smart nor dumb, just thorough. I backed out of the house quietly, got in my truck, and drove to the 24-hour diner on Route 9. Coffee tasted like motor oil, but it gave me time to think. By the time I returned home 2 hours later, the fancy shoes were gone and Laura was asleep, or pretending to be. She lay on her side, breathing evenly, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like spun gold. Beautiful as ever, even in betrayal. I wanted to wake her up and demand explanations, but something held me back. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was strategy. In my line of work, you learn that rushing into repairs without understanding the problem usually makes things worse. The next morning, Laura bustled around the kitchen in her power suit, checking her phone every 30 seconds like it contained the secrets of the universe. She kissed my cheek absently, tasting of expensive lipstick and lies. "Working late again tonight," she announced, not looking up from her screen. "Big presentation tomorrow." "Sure thing," I said, sipping coffee that actually tasted like coffee. "I'll pick up the kids from practice." She nodded and hurried out, leaving behind the scent of her perfume and the weight of her deception. Through the window, I watched her BMW disappear down Maple Street, probably heading to her office at TechFlow Solutions, where she climbed the corporate ladder one rung at a time, stepping on anyone who got in her way. After dropping Beth and Janie at school, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I went through Laura's purse. Her main phone contained nothing interesting, just work emails and grocery lists. But tucked behind her credit cards was a second phone, small and cheap. A burner phone like something from a crime show. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The messages made my stomach turn. Months of them, dating back to January. Explicit photos, planning meetings, discussing how to hide their affair from their respective spouses. The man's name was Scott Brennan, and I knew him. Real estate agent, sold us our house 8 years ago. Smooth talker with perfect teeth and a handshake like a politician. I photographed every message with my own phone, then put everything back exactly as I found it. Laura never suspected a thing. That afternoon, I drove past Scott's office on Main Street. His BMW sat in the reserved parking spot like a trophy. Same model as Laura's, probably bought around the same time. They even coordinated their transportation. The pieces fell into place with mechanical precision. Laura's late nights, her sudden interest in fitness, her new lingerie that I was never around to see. The way she checked her phone constantly, the mysterious phone calls she took in the bathroom. I'd been married to a stranger for months and never realized it. Frank Murphy ran the Last Round Tavern like it was his personal kingdom, and in many ways, it was. Former boxer with hands like sledgehammers and a heart bigger than his ego, Frank had been my friend since high school. His bar served as unofficial headquarters for Millbrook's working-class population, a place where you could drink cheap beer and complain about everything wrong with the world. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Frank said, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden bar. "What's eating you, Jake?" I showed him the photos from Laura's burner phone. Frank's expression darkened with each image, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his bar towel. "That's some serious garbage right there," he said finally. "What are you going to do about it?" "I'm thinking about it." "Don't think too long. Cancer spreads when you ignore it." Frank had a way of cutting through nonsense with surgical precision. 20 years of tending bar had taught him to read people like road maps, and right now he was reading trouble in my face. "You know Scott's wife?" I asked. "Monica? Sure, nice lady. Works at the bank, comes in sometimes for lunch. She doesn't know about this, does she?" "Not yet." Frank nodded slowly. "You're thinking about telling her?" "I'm thinking about a lot of things." The next day, I called Monica Brennan at First National Bank. She sounded professional and pleasant, the voice of someone who still believed her marriage was solid. "Mrs. Brennan, this is Jake Morrison. You might remember me. Your husband sold us our house a few years back." "Of course. How can I help you?" "I need to speak with you privately. It's about Scott and my wife, Laura." "Could we meet somewhere?" The silence stretched long enough for me to count my heartbeats. When Monica spoke again, her voice had changed, become smaller and more fragile. "How about the coffee shop on Elm Street? This afternoon at 2? Monica Brennan was prettier than her photos suggested, with auburn hair and green eyes that probably sparkled when she wasn't learning about her husband's betrayal. She sat across from me in the coffee shop, hands wrapped around her mug like it was an anchor. I showed her the messages, watched her face crumble as she read through months of lies and deception. When she finished, she sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. "How long have you known?" she asked. 3 days. I suspected something was wrong. He's been different lately, secretive, always checking his phone, working late, buying new clothes. She laughed bitterly. I thought he was planning a surprise for our anniversary. "What do you want to do about it?" Monica's green eyes hardened like emeralds. "I want them to pay." We made an interesting team, the auto mechanic and the bank manager. Monica had access to financial records and social connections. I had a workshop full of tools and a growing desire for justice. Together, we planned our campaign like generals preparing for war. Step 1 was evidence gathering. Monica hired a private investigator, a retired police officer named Dave Collins who specialized in infidelity cases. Within a week, Dave provided photos of Scott and Laura entering and leaving various hotels around the county, professional quality images that would hold up in divorce court. Step 2 was social pressure. Monica began sharing carefully selected information with her circle of friends, all prominent women in Millbrook's business community. Laura's reputation as a rising executive began to develop cracks. My contribution was more direct. I knew where Scott parked his BMW during his lunch breaks with Laura. A few pounds of sugar in his gas tank would require expensive repairs and send a message. I left a note under his windshield wiper. "Enjoy your ride, home wrecker." The psychological pressure began to show. Laura became jumpy and paranoid, checking her phone obsessively and starting at unexpected sounds. Scott's car troubles made him late for appointments, damaging his professional reputation. But they weren't backing down. If anything, the pressure seemed to drive them closer together, like criminals bonding over shared danger. Laura retaliated by contacting my biggest client, a collector named Robert Hayes, who'd commissioned me to restore his 1967 Camaro. She told him I was having personal problems that might affect my work quality. Hayes called me into his office and suspended the project pending resolution of my domestic issues. Losing the Hayes contract meant losing $15,000 and my reputation in the collector car community. Laura had aimed for my livelihood and scored a direct hit. "She's playing hardball," Frank observed when I told him about Hayes. "Time to step up your game." "What do you suggest?" "Catch them in the act. Public humiliation works better than private revenge." Frank was right. Monica and I developed a new strategy based on exposure rather than sabotage. We tracked Scott and Laura's movements, learned their patterns, identified their favorite meeting spots. The Millbrook Motor Inn sat on the outskirts of town, a relic from the days when people took driving vacations. Scott and Laura met there every Thursday afternoon, room 237, always paid in cash. Monica confirmed the timing by checking Scott's schedule, and I verified it by following Laura's BMW. On Thursday, March 15th, Monica and I positioned ourselves in the motel parking lot with Dave Collins and his camera equipment. At 2:30, Scott's BMW pulled into the lot, followed 5 minutes later by Laura's identical car. They disappeared into room 237 like actors in a play I never wanted to see. Dave's camera captured everything: their arrival, their guilty looks, their hurried departure 90 minutes later. But photos weren't enough anymore. I wanted confrontation. I approached Scott as he walked toward his car, trying to look casual and failing completely. "Hey, Scott," I called out. "Funny meeting you here." He froze like a deer in headlights, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and terror in rapid succession. "Jake, I had a client meeting in a motel room? That's an interesting business model." Scott's perfect composure cracked like cheap paint. He glanced toward room 237, where Laura was probably watching through the curtains, then back at me. "Look, this isn't what it seems. It seems like you're having an affair with my wife. Am I wrong?" The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. Scott opened his mouth, closed it, then tried to walk around me toward his car. I stepped sideways, blocking his path. "We're not finished talking. I don't have anything to say to you." "Then listen, stay away from my wife, stay away from my family, find yourself a new hobby." Scott tried to push past me. I grabbed his shoulder and spun him around, pressing him against his BMW hard enough to leave a mark. "I'm not asking," I said quietly. "I'm telling." Fear flickered in Scott's eyes, but he tried to maintain his dignity. "You can't threaten me. I'll call the police." "Go ahead. Tell them why you were at a motel with another man's wife. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic." I released his shoulder and stepped back, giving him room to leave. Scott scrambled into his BMW and drove away without looking back, leaving rubber on the asphalt. Monica appeared at my elbow, having watched the entire confrontation from behind a parked truck. "Think that scared him?" she asked. "For about 5 minutes. Men like Scott don't scare easily. They just get more careful." She was right. Over the next week, Scott and Laura changed their patterns, meeting at different locations and times. But they didn't stop seeing each other. If anything, the danger seemed to excite them. I was running out of subtle options. Beth came home from school with a split lip and tears in her eyes. My 12-year-old daughter, who inherited her mother's beauty and my stubborn streak, sat at the kitchen table looking like her world had collapsed. "What happened, sweetheart?" "Tommy Hendricks said you and Mom are getting divorced. He said his mom heard you were having problems and that she was... Beth couldn't finish the sentence, but I understood. Janie, my 9-year-old, appeared in the doorway with her backpack dragging behind her. "Kids at school are saying mean things about Mom. Are you and Mom breaking up?" I knelt down and pulled both girls into a hug, feeling their small bodies tremble against me. This was exactly what I'd been trying to avoid. Laura's affair was spreading through Millbrook like wildfire, and our children were getting burned. "Your mom and I are having some grown-up problems," I said carefully. "But whatever happens, we both love you very much. That will never change." "Is it true about Mom and Mr. Brennan?" Beth asked. She was old enough to understand more than I wanted her to. I looked into my daughter's eyes, so much like Laura's, and made a decision that would change everything. "Yes, sweetheart, it's true." That evening, after putting the girls to bed, I called Monica. She answered on the first ring, sounding as tired as I felt. "Scott's been acting strange," she said without preamble. "Nervous, checking the locks, looking over his shoulder. I think your little parking lot conversation rattled him more than you thought." "Good. Maybe he'll back off." "I don't think so, Jake. I think he's planning something. Yesterday I caught him going through my papers, looking for something. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was worried about our finances." "What kind of papers?" "Bank records, investment statements, insurance policies. Like he was preparing for a divorce." The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. If Scott was preparing for divorce, he and Laura were planning a future together. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was the dismantling of two families. "There's something else," Monica continued. "I found out who's been feeding information to Laura about your business." "What do you mean?" "Remember when she contacted your client, Mr. Hayes? She had inside information about your work schedule, your client list, your financial situation. Someone's been helping her." "Who?" "Rena Castellano." The name hit me like a slap. Rena had been Laura's best friend since college, her maid of honor at our wedding, godmother to our children. She worked in human resources at a local manufacturing company and had access to employment records throughout Millbrook. "Are you sure?" "I saw them together at lunch yesterday. Rena was showing Laura some kind of documents, pointing at specific sections. They looked very cozy. That doesn't make sense. Why would Rena help Laura destroy her own marriage?" "Maybe you should ask her." I remembered Rena from happier times, when she and Laura would spend hours planning parties and gossiping about mutual friends. She'd always seemed supportive of our marriage, friendly to me, and loving toward our children. The idea that she was working against us felt like another betrayal. But it explained how Laura had known exactly which pressure points to target. My client relationships, my reputation in the community, my financial vulnerabilities. Rena had access to all of that information through her job and her friendship with Laura. The next day, I drove to Rena's office at Millbrook Manufacturing. She worked in a sterile corporate environment, all glass and chrome, the kind of place that made me uncomfortable. Her secretary announced my arrival, and Rena appeared a few minutes later looking surprised and guilty. "Jake, what brings you here? We need to talk. Privately." She led me to a conference room and closed the door. Rena was attractive in a sharp, professional way, with dark hair and calculating eyes. I'd never liked her much, but I'd tolerated her for Laura's sake. "I know what you've been doing," I said without preamble. "I don't know what you mean." "You've been helping Laura sabotage my business, feeding her information, helping her plan her affair with Scott." "Why?" Rena's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and vindictive underneath. "You really don't remember, do you?" she said. Remember what? 5 years ago, when I applied for that bookkeeping job with your business. You interviewed me, led me on for weeks, then hired someone else. Someone younger and prettier. I did remember. Rena had applied to handle my business finances, but I'd chosen a certified accountant instead. It had been a purely professional decision based on qualifications, not personal. That was business, Rena. Nothing personal. Everything is personal, Jake. You humiliated me, made me look foolish in front of Laura. She kept asking why you didn't hire me, and I had to pretend it didn't matter. So you decided to destroy my marriage? I decided to show Laura what kind of man she really married. Selfish, small-minded, threatened by successful women. Scott appreciates her in ways you never could. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Rena hadn't just been helping Laura's affair, she'd been orchestrating it. She'd introduced Laura to Scott, encouraged their relationship, provided cover for their meetings. You manipulated her. I opened her eyes. Laura deserves better than a grease monkey who peaked in high school. The insult stung because it contained enough truth to hurt. I had peaked in some ways, content with my small business and simple life while Laura reached for bigger things. But that didn't justify what Rena had done. Does Laura know you're behind all this? Laura thinks she fell in love naturally. She has no idea how much help she needed. Rena's smile was sharp as a knife blade, pleased with her own cleverness. She'd destroyed 2 marriages and felt proud of her accomplishment. I stood up to leave, then turned back. You made one mistake, Rena. What's that? You told me the truth. Now I know exactly who I'm fighting. That afternoon, I called Monica and arranged to meet at the lakeside cabin her family owned outside town. It was time to bring everything into the open, to force all the players onto the same stage for a final confrontation. I have an idea, I told Monica, but you're not going to like it. The cabin sat on the shore of Miller's Lake like something from a postcard, all rough wood and stone, surrounded by pine trees that whispered secrets to the wind. Monica's family had owned it for 3 generations, a place for summer vacations and family reunions. Now it would serve as the stage for our final act. I spent the morning preparing, checking every detail like a mechanic preparing for a race. The cabin had good acoustics and multiple exits. More importantly, it was private enough for honest conversation without public embarrassment. Monica arrived first, looking nervous but determined. She'd agreed to help with my plan despite her reservations. Are you sure about this? She asked. No, but I'm sure about doing nothing. At 2:00, Laura's BMW pulled into the gravel driveway. She emerged wearing her power suit and a confused expression, clearly wondering why I'd asked to meet her at Monica's family cabin. What's this about, Jake? She asked as she approached the front porch. Conversation, long overdue. Scott's BMW arrived 5 minutes later, followed immediately by Rena's Honda Civic. I'd told each of them that the others would be here, that it was time to clear the air and discuss our situation like adults. The look on Laura's face when she realized the scope of the gathering was worth the price of admission. What is this? She demanded. This is honesty, I replied, something we haven't had much of lately. We gathered in the cabin's main room, 5 adults sitting in a circle like some twisted therapy session. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I started with the evidence. Photos from the private investigator, screenshots from Laura's burner phone, financial records showing hotel payments and unexplained expenses. I laid it all out methodically, like presenting a case to a jury. Laura tried to deny everything at first, then shifted to justification and blame. Scott sat silent, looking like he wanted to disappear. Rena watched everything with calculating eyes, probably planning her next move. You've been having an affair for 6 months, I said to Laura. You've been sabotaging my business, lying to our children, and planning to leave me for Scott. You don't understand, Laura began. Then explain it to me. She stood up and began pacing, her composure cracking under pressure. You stopped growing, Jake. You stopped trying. I needed someone who shared my ambitions, who wanted more from life than fixing old cars and drinking beer with Frank Murphy. So you found Scott. Scott understands me. He supports my career, encourages my dreams. Scott's married, Monica interjected quietly. What about his dreams with me? Scott finally spoke up, his voice shaky and defensive. Monica, I never meant for this to happen. It just developed naturally. Naturally? I laughed. Nothing about this was natural. I turned to Rena, who'd been watching the proceedings like a spectator at a tennis match. Tell them, Rena. Tell them how natural it was. Rena's expression shifted, becoming wary. I don't know what you mean. Tell them how you introduced Laura to Scott, how you encouraged their relationship, how you fed Laura information about my business so she could sabotage it. The room went silent. Laura stared at Rena with growing understanding, pieces clicking into place in her mind. Rena? Laura's voice was small and uncertain. I was helping you, Rena said defensively. You were wasting your life with him. You needed to see what was possible. You manipulated me. I opened your eyes. The argument that followed was spectacular. Laura and Rena screamed at each other while Scott tried to disappear into his chair and Monica watched with fascination. Years of friendship disintegrated in minutes as the truth came out. Rena had orchestrated everything, from the initial introduction to the ongoing affair. She'd provided alibis, suggested meeting places, even helped Laura shop for lingerie. All motivated by a 5-year-old grudge against me. When the shouting died down, I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the lake. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. Laura, you're going to pack your things and move out of our house. You can stay with Rena since you two are such good friends. Scott, you're going to tell Monica everything, and then you're going to leave town. Your real estate business here is finished. You can't make us do anything, Scott blustered, finding his courage now that the truth was out. Watch me. I turned back to face the group, and something in my expression made Scott shrink back into his chair. I've documented everything. Photos, financial records, witness statements. I can destroy both your reputations in this town within 24 hours. Laura's corporate career will be over when her boss learns about her affair with a client. Scott's real estate license will be suspended when the state board reviews his ethics violations. What ethics violations? Scott asked. Using confidential client information to facilitate an affair, breach of fiduciary duty, professional misconduct. Should I continue? Monica spoke up from her corner. I've already contacted a divorce attorney. Scott's going to lose half of everything, including his business assets. The fight went out of them like air from a punctured tire. Laura slumped back into her chair, finally understanding the scope of her situation. Scott stared at the floor, probably calculating his losses. Rena looked furious, but trapped. There's one more thing, I said. Our children. Laura, you can see Beth and Janie on weekends, supervised visits until you prove you can be a stable parent. If you try to poison them against me or drag them into your drama, those visits will stop. You can't keep me from my children. I can and I will. A judge will be very interested in how your affair affected their emotional well-being. The bullying at school, the psychological trauma, the instability you've brought into their lives. Laura began to cry, finally realizing what she'd lost. Not just her marriage, but her children, her reputation, her future in Millbrook. The price of her affair was higher than she'd calculated. Scott made one last desperate play. This is crazy, Jake. You can't destroy people's lives over a mistake. A mistake? I walked over to where he sat and leaned down until we were eye to eye. A mistake is forgetting to put oil in your car. This was a deliberate choice to betray people who trusted you. Now, You get to live with the consequences." Scott jumped up and headed for the door, probably planning to run away from his problems. I followed him outside, where the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gravel driveway. "Where are you going, Scott?" "Away from here. Away from this insanity." He fumbled with his car keys, hands shaking with adrenaline and fear. I grabbed his wrist and squeezed just hard enough to get his attention. "You're not running anywhere until you clean up this mess." "Let go of me!" Scott tried to pull away, but I held on. We struggled briefly, and then Scott broke free and stumbled backward toward the lake. His foot caught on a tree root, and he went down hard, landing in the shallow water with a splash that sent ducks flying. I stood on the shore looking down at him, this man who'd helped destroy my marriage, sitting waist-deep in lake water with mud in his hair and his expensive suit ruined. "Stay down there until you figure out how to be a man," I said. Monica appeared beside me, surveying the wreckage of her husband with clinical detachment. "He looks smaller when he's wet," she observed. Behind us, Laura and Rena continued their argument, voices carrying across the water like the cries of angry birds. Their friendship was as finished as my marriage, another casualty of Rena's manipulation. I felt something shift inside me, a fundamental change in how I saw myself and my place in the world. For months, I'd been the victim, the betrayed husband, the man everyone pitied. But standing there watching Scott flounder in the lake while Laura's world collapsed behind me, I realized I'd become something else entirely. I'd become the villain in their story, and I was perfectly fine with that. The Millbrook Founders Day Festival happened every September, a celebration of our town's industrial heritage that nobody under 50 really cared about. Main Street filled with craft booths and food trucks, while a small stage hosted local bands and speeches from politicians nobody would vote for. This year, I had plans for that stage. The weeks following our confrontation at the lake had been busy. Laura moved in with Rena, an arrangement that lasted exactly 4 days before they had another screaming fight, and Laura ended up in a cheap apartment across town. Scott tried to salvage his real estate business, but word of his affair spread through Millbrook's tight-knit community like wildfire. His clients began canceling contracts and seeking new representation. Monica filed for divorce and froze their joint bank accounts. Scott's BMW got repossessed when he couldn't make the payments, a delicious irony that Frank Murphy mentioned every time I visited the last round. My own situation improved dramatically once I stopped playing defense. The Hayes contract came back when I showed Robert Hayes evidence that Laura had lied about my personal problems affecting my work. 3 new clients signed on after word spread that I was single and reliable again. Beth and Janie adjusted to the new normal with the resilience of children. They stayed with me during the week and visited Laura on weekends, though those visits often ended early when Laura's emotional instability became too much for them to handle. "Mom cries a lot," Beth told me after one particularly difficult weekend. "She keeps saying she made mistakes, but she won't say what they were." Laura's career at TechFlow Solutions ended abruptly when her boss learned about the affair with Scott, who'd been a client. Professional relationships require trust, and Laura had demonstrated a remarkable lack of judgment. She found work as a secretary at a law firm, a significant step down from her executive position. Rena got fired from Millbrook Manufacturing when her role in the affair came to light. Apparently, she'd used company resources to investigate my business and personal life, a violation of privacy policies that resulted in immediate termination. She left town shortly afterward, probably looking for a fresh start somewhere that didn't know her history. By September, I'd settled into my new role as the town's most notorious villain. People whispered when I walked down Main Street, pointing out the man who'd destroyed 3 lives over a simple affair. I didn't mind the attention. Respect and fear often looked the same from a distance. The festival stage sat in the center of Main Street, decorated with bunting and surrounded by folding chairs for the audience. Mayor Davidson would give his annual speech about civic pride, followed by presentations from various community organizations. This year, I'd volunteered to represent the Millbrook Small Business Association. Frank Murphy found me backstage, looking concerned. "You sure about this, Jake? Once you say something public, you can't take it back." "I'm not planning to take anything back. People might not understand your side of things. People will understand exactly what I want them to understand." The crowd was smaller than usual, maybe 200 people scattered across the folding chairs and standing along the sidewalks. I spotted Laura near the back, probably hoping to avoid attention. Scott was nowhere to be seen, having left town the previous week after his real estate license was suspended. Mayor Davidson introduced me as a longtime resident and successful businessman who's overcome recent personal challenges. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the real story. I walked to the microphone and looked out at the crowd, seeing familiar faces from 15 years of living in Millbrook. My neighbors, my clients, my children's teachers, people I'd known since high school. They were expecting a generic speech about supporting local business and community values. Instead, I gave them the truth. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jake Morrison, and I want to talk to you about modern marriage." A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the speech they were expecting. 6 months ago, I discovered that my wife Laura was having an affair with Scott Brennan, a local real estate agent. Some of you probably heard rumors about this. Today, I want to set the record straight. The murmur became a buzz. People leaned forward in their chairs, suddenly very interested in what I had to say. Affairs happen. People fall out of love, they make mistakes, they hurt each other. That's human nature. But this affair was different. It was orchestrated by Laura's best friend Rena Castellano as revenge against me for a 5-year-old business decision. I had their complete attention now. Even the vendors stopped hawking their wares to listen. Rena manipulated Laura into the affair, provided cover for their meetings, and helped sabotage my business. She turned my wife against me because I didn't hire her for a bookkeeping job in 2018. Laura stood up from her chair near the back, her face red with embarrassment and anger. "Jake, stop this," she called out. "Why? You didn't stop when you were destroying our family. You didn't stop when our children were getting bullied at school because of your choices. You didn't stop when you tried to ruin my business." The crowd turned to look at Laura, then back at me. I had them in the palm of my hand. I want everyone to understand something about consequences. When you betray people who trust you, when you lie and manipulate and scheme, there's always a price to pay. Laura lost her family, her career, and her reputation. Scott lost his business and left town in disgrace. Rina lost her job and had to start over somewhere else. "This is harassment," Laura shouted. "You can't do this." "I'm just telling the truth, Laura. Something you never tried." Scott's voice came from the edge of the crowd. He'd returned to town without anyone noticing, probably hoping to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. "You're a bitter man, Jake. You destroyed 3 lives because you couldn't handle your wife leaving you." The crowd parted as Scott pushed through toward the stage. He looked terrible, unshaven and desperate, wearing clothes that had seen better days. "Your wife left you because you're a loser," he continued. "A small-town nobody who couldn't give her what she needed." I smiled and stepped closer to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Brennan, the man who helped destroy 2 families and then ran away when things got difficult. Tell me, Scott, how's the real estate business treating you these days?" Scott's face turned purple with rage. He climbed onto the stage, probably planning to attack me in front of 200 witnesses. I stepped aside as he lunged forward, and momentum carried him straight into the festival's dunking booth, which had been set up next to the stage for a charity fundraiser. The splash was magnificent. Scott surfaced sputtering and humiliated, soaking wet in front of the entire town. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause, enjoying the unexpected entertainment. I returned to the microphone for my closing remarks. In conclusion, I want to thank everyone for their support during this difficult time. My children and I are doing well, my business is thriving, and we're looking forward to a fresh start. As for my former wife and her friends, I wish them luck finding happiness somewhere else. I stepped down from the stage to thunderous applause, leaving Laura and Scott to deal with their public humiliation. Monica appeared at my side, having watched the entire spectacle from the front row. "That was brutal," she said. "That was justice." We walked away from the festival together, leaving behind the wreckage of my old life and the people who'd tried to destroy it. Beth and Janie waited for us at Frank's bar, where they'd been watching through the window with growing amazement. "Dad, did you really make Mr. Brennan fall in the water?" Janie asked. "He fell all by himself, sweetheart. I just got out of the way." "Are you in trouble?" Beth wanted to know. "No, honey. I'm finally out of trouble." That evening, we had dinner at home, just the three of us around our kitchen table. No drama, no lies, no betrayal. Just a father and his daughters, planning their future in a town where everyone now knew exactly who they were dealing with. Laura called that night, crying and begging for forgiveness. I listened to her apologies and promises, then hung up without saying a word. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. Frank stopped by later with a bottle of whiskey and a satisfied grin. "You know what they're calling you downtown?" he asked. "What's that?" "The man who won." I poured 2 glasses and raised mine in a toast. "Here's to winning ugly. Sometimes that's the only way to win it all." Outside, Millbrook settled into another quiet evening. A small town where everyone knew everyone else's business and justice sometimes wore the face of revenge. I'd become the villain in Laura's story, the man who'd destroyed her dreams of a better life with a better man. But in my own story, I was something else entirely. I was the hero who'd saved his children, protected his livelihood, and refused to be a victim. The whiskey tasted like victory, and victory tasted just fine.